Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Earthians Unscripted, which will be a live stream slash podcast by me, Dima Syrotkin. And the main thing that I'm trying to do with this is to explore what it means to be a human. And why am I doing that is because one of my principles in life, the main principles that I operate on, is that every individual perceives reality uniquely. Hello, everyone. And it's worth trying to understand their reality vis-a-vis your own. So it's important to understand, how do other people think? And I've been thinking a lot about, what kind of stream would I like to have, or podcast. And at the beginning, it seemed like, I should really focus on what I've been doing with my life, such as startups or business. But in reality, what interests me most is other people and having interesting discussions with them. And unfortunately, all too often in the business world, people don't open up and they don't show the real self. And sometimes when it does happen, those conversations are fun, magical. And I always had this feeling, man, I wish I had this recorded. And that's what I'm going to do now, right? I'm going to try to meet interesting people that I find cool and who are willing to open up to a higher level and talk about deep and interesting, meaningful things and record it. Right, so I'm really doing it to keep a record, and hopefully some of you who are watching this in the process will also enjoy that which we are talking about. So without further ado, I want to invite my first guest and speaker to Earthians Unscripted episode 1, which is Dima Syrotkin. So Dima, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I feel like the expectations are, through the roof.
Well,
after such an intro,
I'm a man of high expectations, and I think it's kind of important to do that. But really, I think the important thing is just to have fun and enjoy the process and see if anybody reacts and asks us any questions.
Let's create some magic.
Magic it is. So
magical discussions.
When we met over coffee and in many times, we talked about anything from business to philosophy, and really enjoy those conversations. And to get us started, I think one thing I found fascinating is this challenge of yours of reading one book a week. Why the hell would you put yourself through that torture?
I feel like I'm getting known for that, which is both the good thing and the bad thing. I think this is like the third podcast that I'm being invited on. I think partly because of that. So maybe that's one of the consequences. But really, I just felt like I think it started when I was reading one book by Charlie Munger, the business partner of Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett.
Yeah.
And he said something really that's kind of shook me a bit, where he said that I've known no wise man, zero, who didn't read ferociously. And at that point I was reading really little, and I felt like, damn, like that's very categorical statement. Like it's zero, not even one. And he's pretty old. Like he's like, I don't know, he's probably 90 right now, but back when he was writing the book, he's, I don't know, maybe 50, 60 already.
Do you think books do you think books actually provide you with wisdom or with knowledge?
I think it can be both. What's the difference for you?
To me, it's a huge difference, and that's something I've been thinking a lot about in the past couple of years. And I'm more and more fascinated with wisdom, and I'm more and more tired of knowledge. Right? So, knowledge is a thing you go to school for, and they try to give you knowledge while you try to do everything you can not to receive it. Right? So they're taking facts and going like, you must know this, you must learn this fact, and this is just a collection of facts. It's like a database, if you will, right? So it's an attempt to fill up your database with useful and useless information, right? So to me, that's knowledge. Whereas wisdom is an ability to not even apply. I think wisdom is higher than that, right? Okay, you can apply the knowledge, but wisdom, I feel that wisdom can exist without knowledge. Right, you can create your own wisdom out of almost nothing.
Yep.
And to me, that's the big difference, right? And I think all too often that we're chasing knowledge and not wisdom.
How do you know when we arrived? at that point of wisdom? Like when do you know that, okay, this is a nugget of wisdom? Like how do you know that, oh yeah, that's it?
I think, I think it's a lot about when you know that it comes from you, right? So you go like, aha, it's this aha moment where like, from now on, I will live my life differently, right? So from now on, when certain situations will arrive, I will make a different choice as to compared the previous aspects of my life, right? So I think that's one element, right, of that, is that I also believe that change is actually very fast, right? So real change, it just happens like instantaneously. Like before you were doing one thing, and after that you're doing a completely different thing. And I think that's what wisdom does, right? You basically become a different person on the spot.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And in terms of change, I actually I tend to agree, and I try to kind of like to manufacture those moments of change in my life, and somehow it's actually, people often advocate for this like sort of step by step change. So you start with like, okay, I don't know, like some people want to become vegetarian, and then it's about kind of like, okay, I cut a little bit, and then I cut a bit more, and then sort of I transition like that. For me, that's been really challenging all the time. Whenever there is still, because I find that a lot of stuff that I try to, for example, cut out of my life are a bit addictive, or a lot addictive. So I can't really cut a little bit. I need to like completely stop that. So yeah, but it's
So like what? Totally different topic, addiction. But when you are trying to tackle addiction, so do you feel that the best way is just to completely cut it and stop it and not do it at all?
Exactly. And I feel that most of the things that I'm sort of struggling with are addictions.
Like
So
like
things
like
that
like can you give us an example?
Yeah, of course, tons. So
I'm glad that you have tons.
I'm not so glad, but that's the reality.
Yeah.
So to me, TV series are an addiction, and there is a line between sort of something great, like a piece of art that I really like. I know that I will enjoy it, but what I noticed over time is that I stopped enjoying it, but I kept on watching stuff just because it became comfortable. It became sort of, there was a habit of like, okay, that's an easy thing I can do with my time, and take some rest, but it wasn't fulfilling anymore. So that's one. Computer games is another one.
Tell me about it. I mean, last season of Game of Thrones, it still haunts me at night. Like, why did I do that?
Well, there you were trapped. Like you kind of like you knew that it's but I think what's more fascinating is, Game of Thrones, it started good. So there it's like we can excuse you. But if it actually started bad, like if you watch a TV series and it's not, it's so, but you continue watching that. I don't know if you've ever had that experience.
Yeah, I have, and I think that's that's this gambler's fallacy, right? So you've invested a little bit into it, and you think that because I've invested half a year of my life watching Game of Thrones, I must watch it till the end. But that's the gambler's fallacy, right? Like if you're actually a fully rational human being, you must quit because you're not getting any value out of it. It's a horrible show. They completely destroyed everything. You know it's not going to get better. So like you're like, it's like being stuck in a bad relationship, right? You're like, everything is horrible, but I've been doing it for so long, I might as well keep doing it. I don't get that logic, but same thing with Game of Thrones and with many things in life. I think it's important to reevaluate things on an ongoing basis and to ask yourself, like, should I continue be doing whatever it is I'm doing? And to cut things out, to be like, okay, maybe I shouldn't, right? And be like very rational, honest about it.
Exactly. Yeah, I have like a list of sort of habits I'm trying to implement, and I think like half of them are cutting things out.
Yeah.
So not really adding anything, but actually like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this.
Well, I think I think that's very cool because, and I think that's a very commendable approach, I would say, because I think a lot of people think that success is about doing more things, right? And I'm like, very often it's actually about cutting things away and doing less. Right, it's
actually an interesting and related question, and let me know if you feel like I'm jumping too much.
No, it's okay.
I feel like this is totally unscripted. You mentioned about doing more. What's your stance on sort of hard work? Do you because I feel like there is sort of constantly this question of like, is working more justified? given certain, high ambitions and high goals. And more than that, maybe one more thought is that my feeling is that in Finland specifically, it's a bit of a taboo where you sort of, you're not supposed to work hard.
Yeah, I mean,
Do you think it's a healthy culture in that regard?
well, look, I think for that we need to really think. I mean, I could talk about this for hours, this topic alone, right? But it bothers me to some extent. But where I start is from the question of, what is work, right? I know we kind of,
Yep.
and that has to do with, social construction of reality that our parents or society put upon us, that we don't question it, right? We just kind of assume that everybody must work. But why must we work, right? Like, where does it come from? Did we always work? And I have a good friend, Skinner, and he introduced me to this concept, and he kind of said it on stage, and I was in the audience, and I was like, well, he's right. And he said that work is a very new concept. And I started looking into the history of it, and yeah, it's absolutely true. 300 years ago, nobody had work the way we see it. 200 years ago, nobody had work. 150 years ago, 9 to 5 didn't exist, right? Like nobody worked 9 to 5. That was not a concept. It only happened with industrialization. Before that, everybody had they had craft, right? You were a watchmaker, you were a farmer, and you just did it for however much was needed in order to sustain your family or whatever it is you're doing. The only people who had work were maybe people like servants or people who worked for like kings and queens and things like that, right? But like, you didn't really have a concept of work. And if you go way back before that, cave age, I love going back to the cave age because I think, you can learn a lot from them, surprisingly maybe. But like, what kind of work was there, right? You had to hunt and you had to grow stuff. So I think if you go to that, one thing you start realizing is that there is no such thing as work. That's just something we came up with. You have to do something with your life, yes. But like the notion of work destroys that to some extent, because work in any language is a very negative thing. In Russian, it's rabota, which comes from slavery. In German, Arbeit, similar, right? Like in any language, if you take almost any language, the actual origin of the word work is either slavery or torture, right? Like, and if you start thinking that way and doing work from that regard, you will always feel bad doing it. So for me, it's important to switch your mindset to be like, well, am I working or am I actually doing something with my life, right? Because if you're working, you're by definition suffering. So I don't like to suffer. So I don't work. I'm trying not to work. I'm trying to put myself into a position where I do a lot of things that enhance my life experience, right? From the outside, that looks like work, right? But from the inside, it's less so. And that's one part of it. I think like changing that mindset is super important.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think that the difference could be between creation and consumption / relaxation.
Yeah.
Let's put it this way. So the question then becomes, do you think hard creation is a good thing? So kind of like go
what do you think on that?
Well, it depends on your goals, first of all. I think a lot of people are happy with sort of the division of like, okay, I have this certain sort of work hours and then I have certain consumption hours. And I think that's, if that works, then why not? Sort of, that's great. I think that I like the story of Da Vinci. Sort of being able to to master several crafts and being able to so I'm yet to study him in more depth, but from what I understand so far, it really seems like a life of creation.
That man did a lot of things.
yeah and to me that looks exciting. Like to me that is the exciting part, not so much the consumption part.
Do you think it's possible to actually have that kind of life in our world, in our society today, as opposed to the society that he lived in?
Sure, I think it's actually easier in our lifetime, and I think there are a number of people who do live that lifestyle already. I'm not sure if I would be able to come up right away, like on top of my mind, but like imagine if like you live in sort of his time, like knowledge is probably a lot more scarce. Like where do you find books? Where do you find people to talk to about these things? Like nowadays, there's so many things you can do just, right off the bat. But I think the thing we are struggling with is perhaps consumption, and that's back to the topic of addictions that we discussed just before. I feel like it's consuming us in a way, where we start sort of doing things we don't really enjoy, just because they're comfortable.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's very interesting. I saw the comments about microphone levels being not on the same level with you and me. I have adjusted that, hopefully. So let us know in the chat and the comments if this has been improved. Hopefully it has been. So let us know. But coming back to the topic, one thing I also find fascinating about what you said is, once you change your mindset about work, right? Then what is left is activity, right? Like you have to like do things, and you have to do something in society with your life, right? So you still have to do something. And I think what a lot of people in our world don't realize is that everything in life has the other side. And what I mean is there's day, there's night, right? There is black and there's white. And I think with activity, that must be the same, right? So you have activity and then you have non-activity, right? For your body, for your mind, for, if you want to call it soul or whatever, right? You must have that. So people who work 60-hour days, it's like your heart, right? Your heart beats and then there's offbeat. You breathe in, you breathe out, right? So if you have 60, 70, 80-hour work weeks, you're not giving yourself that time. You don't give, and I see that relaxation as a part of your activity, right? So like you need to, and that's why I think it's actually really healthy what in Finland, more healthy than in other countries, right? Because in a lot of cultures in Asia or in the US, like it's normal to just only work, right? And then we wonder why heart rate problems are there, and obesity and suicides and all that stuff, right? So I think it's really important to realize that you are just like your heart. You need the offbeats.
I agree with that a lot. And I think like one questions that I think a lot about lately is how to relax, how to have quality sort of relaxation time. Because to me, sort of a lot of that's the thing, like again, back to addictions, the interesting thing about this thing I call addictions, which, I mean, depends how you classify that. Maybe it's not addictions, maybe that's consumption of, let's say TV series, etc. I noticed that sometimes or most of the times it's not fulfilling. So it's not actually rest. Like I actually feel tired after doing it. Like I don't feel better. I don't feel rested. And I face the like hard question of like, wow, like I don't know how to take rest. Like whenever work stops, I have this craving for something easy and comfortable, like TV series. And actually, I'm not able to stay in that sort of in silence. I'm not stable to go into like for example, going into nature is one of the sort of classical typical ways how you theoretically could relax. And to me, I find that actually that to do that first step, to go into nature, to go into park, feels like work. Surprisingly, like it feels like it requires energy to do that, to go there. I don't know
you
if
have to put in your shoes and and then you have to go somewhere. It's much harder to do that than to click play on Netflix, right?
And that's surprising. And I had this almost like I had the thought, I'm not yet sure if it's how valid it is, but sort of that it's like in the car, you need to jump start the car sometimes. Like it has to have a certain amount of energy to start. And I feel like I often deplete my energy to the point where I can't do anything that's healthy. So I'm only left with this sort of consumption activities that leave me only worse off before I have to go to sleep.
I like this idea of jumpstart energy, right? You have to have that. And I think that is often my trick, right? Like, okay, I'm not gonna go to the woods, but I'm gonna put on my shoes, right? Okay, well, I want to put on my shoes, I might as well do something else, right? So yeah, I think that's one good trick to starting new things, is to just like, okay, what's the smallest thing I can do? I'm now doing, for instance, every day I'm doing workouts for 7 minutes, right? Not a lot, but 7 minutes is better than 0, which was a long part of my life was 0. But it didn't start with 7 minutes. It started with one push-up, right? I'm like, okay, screw it. I'm just gonna do one push-up a day, right? And or like one sit-up, or I'm just gonna stretch, right? And eventually, one push-up a day gets kind of boring. And like, well, maybe I can do like 2. Frankly, 2 became quite quick, right? But now I've been doing 7 minutes every day for maybe 4 or 5 months, 3, 4, 5 months or something like that. I need to check my app. But now I feel often it's like, well, maybe I should do 14 minutes, right? Like, why not, right? It doesn't cost anything anymore. It requires like the jumpstart energy is much less, so I can actually go ahead and do it.
Interesting.
So I think that's a worthy point to contemplate about, and I think addictions still bother me. And I mean, gaming is one that's been around ever since I had my first computer in 90 whatever, right? And but I am, unlike you, I'm trying to find a way to not cut it like fully, right? Because there are beneficial things in some of those. There's the relaxation part, and I'm trying to figure out how can I use some of my addictions to actually relax and to actually gain a benefit, right? Like, can I even do that?
I think the difference is really how much do you enjoy it. And I think that sometimes we just lose track of that. So an example can be very simple. There are certain sort of movies I know I'm going to enjoy. So I'm really looking forward to The Dune by Denis Villeneuve. The movie
yes,
it
comes out on my birthday. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, let's see how that plan is gonna. I hope they stick to it. But yeah. So yeah, like that's so I know that I'm so likely to enjoy that movie that I'm not skipping it. Like I'm gonna enjoy it to the fullest. But to me the challenge was when I sort of overindulge in these things, where I sort of continue going for those. So I think definitely like certain things where you find like great art can be very fulfilling. So I think it's definitely not when you enjoy it, then it's not about cutting it.
How do you know when you're overindulging? Right, like it's very easy to trick yourself to be like, this is actually really good for me for 10 hours straight.
Well, I think so. Time is one of the. Well, I think it's about like kind of like how do you feel after it? I think, and I to me it's like if I watched it for like 10 hours straight, I do feel like like was this time worth it?
Yeah.
Versus like when I watched a really great movie and it was like the first movie I watched in a month, like I'm sure that I'm gonna be like, whoa, like this was amazing. Like I really loved my evening, and this was a great way to spend my time and actually provided some relaxation. So I think that's the biggest difference. And again, I think it depends. It's just that for me, time is something I've became really. I'm becoming more and more sort of conscious of, and it's I don't know. I feel like time is running out, even though I'm still relatively young. I feel like, yeah, I feel like it's speeding up more than that.
On that topic, I received. I was just mentoring a group of people in an event called Cocoon. It's a very cool event in Tartu for founders and entrepreneurs. And I think one of the best things about mentoring is you actually learn a lot yourself, right? But well, one person there said a quote which I absolutely loved, exactly on what you said, and I think like I'm gonna like write it on a wall. It was that good. I even asked him like who said it, and he was like me. I'm like, oh wow, like, this is good. But he said, when it feels like you're running out of time, or time is too short, you don't need to speed up. You need to stop. And I was like, wow, that make yeah, of course, right? Like maybe it's much easier to stop. Maybe I'm doing too many things. Maybe I'm trying to do too many things. Maybe I'm rushing too fast. Ambition's too high, or whatever, right? Like and stopping and slowing down can actually be the fastest way to solve that and actually to achieve something, which goes into the thing we talked about before of the fact that a lot of time you need to stop doing things, right? As opposed to starting doing things. This concept of non-doing, which goes in many philosophies, right? Can you do the non-doing? Can you actually start cutting things away instead of adding things on top, right? So I think, again, with habits and stuff, it's really about, like, can you stop things instead of adding things? And I think that's
really, really powerful. Yeah.
very, very important.
It's actually one of the things I wrote for myself as well. Like, okay, as soon as you feel temptation, stop. And I watched an interview with one of the writers. I don't actually remember who it was. I think it was Neil Gaiman, if I'm not mistaken. And he said, I have this policy where I have to sort of sit and I can either write or do nothing, in a certain couple of hours of the day.
Yeah.
And he's like, doing nothing is allowed, but I'm not allowed doing anything else except that. So I either write or I do nothing. And I found that really powerful, because it's like, because we never really do nothing. We or very rarely.
It's very hard.
Very rarely.
It's very hard.
And it's really hard. Yeah. And it's and it actually brings clarity. I found that with a lot of these things that I call sort of consumptive addictions, they are very impulsive. They're very reactive. It's like there's a craving, and I'm rushing. I'm hiding away from my feelings. I'm trying to kind of like, to hide from them as fast as possible. And therefore, like, stopping is actually really powerful, because it lets me confront these feelings. It lets me kind of like rethink, okay, what is really important here?
Yeah.
Do I really feel tired, or do I just feel scared?
Yeah.
Or what is this?
And I think sometimes it's almost impossible to realize it without stopping. And it's actually very hard to stop, right? Last year I went on a 7-day, which was supposed to be 7-day, actually it was shorter for me, like a complete silent retreat alone without anyone, and few books and exercises. And it was an amazing experience. It was my way of stopping, but I'm a very active person, so like 3-4 days for me is like a century. But at the same time, that was one of the best things I've done, because it completely reset my mind, and it allowed me to cut things, to stop things, to look at my life from a fresh angle and kind of re-evaluate it, see what's important. And then now I think the whole world stopped, and this is a cool opportunity. I don't want to talk about COVID, just a disclaimer, but now that the world has stopped, I think this is an awesome opportunity for a lot of people to take that break, right? And if you're not doing that, well, you're losing the opportunity, right, of what's life giving you, right? So now is a really interesting time for a lot of people, and I think I'm really excited about the future of what's going to happen in the future.
Yeah, I'm also one of the few people who feel actually kind of excited about what's going on. But actually, like on what you said, I'm really curious to ask you a weird question.
Yes, please.
So who are you, Dima? Because you said that like that really helped you to clarify your mind, and then sort of, and we spoke before, and we had a couple of coffees, but like, how would you answer a question like that?
I love that, and the reason I love that is because I promise this to be unscripted, right? And literally, like the only thing almost that I wrote in my notebook in front of me is the question, "Who are you?" which was gonna ask you.
I was first,
but you beat me to it, right? So like.
And we didn't plan this.
No, we didn't plan this. This is literally like the only thing I have written in my notebook as a question, because it is a trick question.
Trick question.
It is a trick question, because when you ask people normally, who are you? Well, they say, I'm Dimitri. And like, well, what does that mean? And they go, well, I am 30 whatever years of age. I live there, and then they start explaining their life story. I'm like, but that's not you. Right? And then like, well, I look like this, and this is my work, and I am an entrepreneur. I'm like, so what? Like, your life is defined by the word entrepreneur? Is that all you are? Like, well, no, I'm also a father. Okay. And then you start expanding on it, and then expanding on it, and then and then eventually, if you keep pushing them on this, who are you? They'll be like, well, I don't know. Right? Mm-hmm. Like, eventually you'll go to I don't know, and then you're like, well, great. Now go look for it. Right? go figure it out. And that is an amazing journey to try to figure it out. Who are you? right? To ask yourself that question, honestly answer it. And I have a very interesting theory about it, thanks to Alan Watts, one of my favorite philosophers that I listen a lot to. And he kind of gives away the answer to that question, right? And I'm not sure if it's a good thing to give away that answer, right? Because there is an answer, but if you give it away, then people stop looking for themselves, right? And if you stop looking for yourself, you don't get the result of the process, right? So it's a bit difficult for me because I want to get the benefit of the process of looking for myself, but I know the answer of what happens in the end. So I'm kind of like, I know the answer, but I'm going to keep looking anyways, because answering that question is extremely important for anyone, right? Because I think it's important to realize within that question that you're not bound by the realities that are put upon you by society, work, and people. You're not just an entrepreneur. You're not just a father. You're not just a son or a wife or a daughter of your parents. You're not just something, right? Your beingness is much more than the collective sums of everything that you could possibly be. But at the same time, it's much less also. And therein lies the answer, right? So if I were to answer your question, which I was not doing, I guess, I am a being that is exploring its own beingness. So I would answer that way, and I'm doing it actively, proactively, and through other people, right? So and that's one of the reasons for this podcast. As I said, every individual is extremely unique, right? And I think we often, and not everybody, but a lot of people undervalue just how unique we really are. And by trying to understand that uniqueness, for me, it helps me to clarify my own being, right? So like talking to you, I learn a lot about myself, right? And it really helps to come up with practical changes in my life. I don't know if that answered the question. Feel free to give a follow-up or agree or disagree.
Yeah, I guess a follow-up. No, I mean, makes sense. I guess the follow-up would be, so you mentioned that there's sort of the sort of the two stages, the answer and the sort of where you are right now and you're looking. I guess the question is, first of all, what is the answer? So maybe give us spoilers. And then the second question is, where are you right now in the search? Like, what are you looking for? How do you define yourself, if at all? Yeah, at what level of the search are you? What's most important to you right now?
I think first of all, I'm gonna put a disclaimer. It's that if whoever you are watching this as a recording or live, if you don't want to know the answer, close your ears for about 60 seconds. I will make sure that I'll answer in 60 seconds, and then from that you can listen again. This is not good for the number of viewers we have right now, but let's go for it. So in 5 seconds, I'll give the answer to the question of who are you. All right. So according to Alan Watts, at least, if you start searching for yourself deeply, eventually you find that there is no you to be found, right? That there is no you. You separate yourself fully from your ego, right? And you realize that your ego is just a concept of your own imagination, and that your beingness is much more than just what you call yourself, right? What you call yourself is really nothing compared to what really is happening down below. And I guess now spoiler is done, and hopefully people can come back and listen. And I guess for me, I know this to be true intellectually, and I know this to be true experientially. I have experienced that feeling, but only fleetingly, only for moments at a time, right? Microseconds. And the process I'm in right now is how can I do this more, right? How can I be more in that state of mind where I don't think about that, where I'm more present, if you will, right? If I'm like more able to really internalize that feeling, right? And that's where I am at, right? I'm trying to make sure that I do that more and more and more. But how about yourself? What's your answer on this beautiful magical question?
Yeah, I found it interesting that like every time I answer it, it's usually different. So I hope that that means that I'm evolving and not that I just don't know what the hell I'm talking about. That could be another way to put it. Yeah, it's really interesting. I'm gonna come back to what you said, but anyways, how would I answer the question of who am I? I think currently in my life, like kind of like where I am right now is that I define myself through ambition. I think that there is a huge potential out there, and it's I want to fulfill that potential essentially for myself and for humanity overall. Um, and um, I feel like at some point a few years ago, I kind of got infected with the idea that nothing is impossible, and that's one of the things that I'm kind of like I'm trying to push the boundaries and really kind of like see what is possible. And I read recently the book by a couple of years ago perhaps book by Harari, Homo Deus, where he talks about the fact that we as people are getting closer to God's. So that to me is sort of the journey that I wanna see unfold. I don't know if that all that talk about singularity and us being more powerful than ever before is actually gonna sort of materialize. But I'm curious to sort of push the envelope and see what is actually possible. One of the things I think a lot about lately is death and the fact that maybe we don't have to die anymore. There's another, like one of my favorite books is Lifespan, which was published pretty recently by one, I think he's from Harvard researcher, if I'm not mistaken, who talks about the fact that there is actually huge advancements in medicine, and there are possibilities how to actually even biologically extend our life possibly. And that thought, like once I really internalized it, it really somehow changed a lot on a very practical level because I was like, wow, like that changes everything. Like all the history of humanity, we believe that there is this thing called death and you can't go past it. And it's like a fixed point in time. You can't even, do much about it. And suddenly people talk about a thing called longevity escape velocity. So at a point where the science is developing faster, then you're sort of you're approaching that point. So I think that is part of the answer. So trying to really explore what's my potential, what's humanity's potential. Particularly, I'm interested in longevity. I'm interested in political and economical system and education. Meaning, like, how can we understand ourselves better? How can we sort of explore ourselves better? And but finally, to close, on the other hand, I also share with you this feeling of like sort of everything is interconnected, and all is one, and there is something sort of deeper behind this matrix, and that's I don't fully trust it yet. So I also had it as a fleeting experience, and it's but it's something that is still in my mind, and I'm like, whoa, like yeah, if that is real, that also changes everything.
Yeah, and I think with that, a lot of people when we speak about those things, they get a bit scared or something to speak about it because it sounds like new age hippie stuff, right?
Yeah.
And that's why I'm trying to come up with language that is escaping that trap, right? Because to me, this interconnectedness, it's not just saying, oh, in a thing, right? Although I have nothing against thing, but at the same time, that scares people away, right? So, but I mean, I think it's a very practical thing to think about, right? Yeah, you don't have to, be a hippie or take LSD to understand this, right? You can just look at nature, right, and like analyze things and look at it. And one example that I'd like to give is like, okay, you just ask me, who am I, right? But we as a humanity can ask the tree, what is a tree? Right? And if we look at a tree, and which we've done, right? We realize after we look at it deep enough that you can't take the tree away from everything else. Then it doesn't become a tree, right? In the beginning, when we looked at the tree, we're like, well, it's a biological entity, but it also has physical properties. We can study the chemistry of the leaves. You can look at the biology of the interconnectedness of the tree to all the other organisms. You can look at the actual physical properties of the wood and the friction coefficients and whatnot, right? But like none of those in itself explains what that tree is, right? Like none of it actually goes like, well, this is a tree. A physicist can't explain what a tree is. A chemist can't explain what a tree is. A biologist can't do it. All of them together get a little bit closer, but nowhere close enough. And if you start, exploring deeper, just to the simple question, what is a tree, you'll figure out that you can't answer that question without answering all the questions, right? You can't answer that question without understanding everything about how the universe works, right? Because, answering that question will force you to go deeper and deeper. At some point, a normal human will just give up and say, well, it's good enough for me, right? I'm like 20% there towards understanding what a tree really is and how it works and how it's connected to everything. That's a tree, and that's usually like this closed-mindedness, right? Super rational thinkers who go like, well, a tree is a biological entity that grows from earth up and has green elements on its branches. Good enough, right? But they don't go deep enough, right? But I think it's very practical. If you do, you'll start understanding on a very practical, non-hippie way that everything is interconnected, because eventually it is. And I think that actually gives you a lot of power for like business, right? So once you realize that everything is interconnected, and people like Elon Musk and other great entrepreneurs start putting the things that are not actually supposed to be co-joined into, they join them, and then they build great companies, right? Because they play by the rules of interconnectedness, right? And then so I think it has very practical life implications to think about those things. And again, as I said, you don't have to pray or do meditation to get there, right? You can use logic, fine, right? Just then don't stop at the 30%. Keep going. Keep asking the question.
I watched the masterclass by Neil deGrasse Tyson, the famous astrophysicist, if I'm not mistaken. He is, who is famous for his communication about science. And he said one thing that his dad said to him that really, as he says, like was one of the sort of defining things for his career, which he said, like, it's not enough to be right, you also have to be effective. Meaning for him that it was not enough to be a scientist who sort of knows the answer. He had to also communicate it to people and ensure that they get it as well. And that the thing, it has to work. And I think that is the thing that's, what you were saying about like this practical wisdom. It's like, I think if we can find that and show that to people, then I think that would, that will work. And so one thing's actually talking about business. One of the things that I'm really interested in, and I'm actually starting, I'm still debating if it's a great idea to start with for me to apply, but I'm starting my PhD in Aalto University.
Oh wow, cool.
And the topic I'm most interested in is self-management in organizations. So perhaps you've heard of teal, holacracy, things like that. And it's sort of like, it seems like the next level shit, but it hasn't yet proven itself to the world. And I'm really curious to sort of understand it deeper and be like, okay, like, is it really the cultural thing that holds us, away? And also in my work, sort of what I'm mainly working on is like, okay, we believe in people, we believe in people's potential, And if we were to invest in people more, then there would be better results for the business as well, because the people would be more conscious, they would be more self-aware, they would be more effective. But that is not exactly a common belief yet. And the question that I didn't yet fully answer for myself is like, are these things effective actually? Or do we have this sort of two domains of like doing and being? I feel like there's always this dichotomy between, like sort of like just being and as you say, type of things where you're happy, and sort of achievement and sort of like hard work and doing and pushing the boulder up the mountain, but being very successful at it.
Yeah. I mean that you touched on so many topics. I don't know which one to
Yeah.
handle. There was a lot in there.
Yeah, but I think the key is like, okay, is this back to what you were saying, that like that you think this sort of uh let's say the wisdom about the reality of the universe, and sort of like understanding that, okay, the the meaning of things is the primary sort of objective, like why are we here, and what are we doing, and who are we, so that we need to show the practical side of these things if we want them to propagate and if we want them to grow, right? And it's still, I think, an open debate. Like that's why it's not accepted. Sort of that's why it's not mainstream.
yeah,
It's
I
still
mean,
an open debate of like, is it actually effective?
yeah,
Is it?
yeah, and I think in that regard, the teal and new ways of working, where it's more flat and everybody has full power. Um, I'm a great believer in that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I also see that you know everybody needs to have watched Star Trek for that to work, right? Or what
The
I
old or the new?
the old, right? And what I mean by that is that like everybody in the organization must be at a certain level,
Mm-hmm.
right? I've tried to build organizations like that, and sometimes with successful results, sometimes with horrible failures, and it all has to do with the people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's you know it's simple things. Like for me, number one value in life that I have is taking full responsibility for everything that I do. And if even one person in an organization doesn't take that, right, they don't take responsibility, they will start blaming others, right? They will start blaming the CEO, the boss, and even if you convince them not to blame the CEO or whoever else, they will start blaming the government or the political situation or coronavirus, right, for everything that that's bad in their life, instead of taking their life fully and changing it so that they
Mm-hmm.
don't have anyone to blame. Um, and that's the problem. Like if to for that, I think, to work, the people in the organization need to be at that level, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if people in organization still believe in strict Soviet style military approach to building armies and organizations, and you come in with your, well, everybody can make decisions in our company, it's not going to work very well. Right? And that's where I think that the difficulty is in these organizations, because they're becoming very popular, and then some companies, organizations who don't have the people to be able to support that style, starting to implement it, they will fail inevitably in that approach. And then the process gets the bad vibe, right? And people go like, well, it doesn't work. No,
Let
it's a
me
bad
push a
thing.
little bit on that. So, what do you think though about sort of organizations like Burzorg, and there's sort of a number of others that the sort of the original author sort of outlined in his book. So, like I
Yeah.
think Burzorg, when he was writing a book, they were like 8,000 people. Now I think they're 12,000 people.
Yeah.
Sort of. What do you think about that? Do you think that's sort of that he started right with sort of the core group, and then maybe the culture spread to the rest, or like because.
Well, I mean, first of all, some organizations like Burzorg, they approach they I think there's the easy way to do it, right? When you have small teams, right? When you have
Mm-hmm,
teams of
mm-hmm,
7 people, and you have a lot of those small teams, right?
yep.
So almost any team that is about 7 people, 12 people in size actually does the flat hierarchy approach, because that's the most
Mm-hmm,
efficient. But higher numbers, that's where the difficulty is, right? So that's
mm-hmm,
where it's hard to start doing it and trusting fully in every chain of the company, right?
Well, then just do the cells.
Right, then you do more
That would be
cells.
the
Right,
answer.
right. Then you do more cells. But what I'm
Yeah.
interested really in is organizations that actually try to like figure out how to organize themselves in a new way without doing the cells, where it can be more efficient organization between society, right? Because I think it's possible, but I think it's extremely hard. But I think that's, I am a great believer in the fact that, what makes us different from animals or whatever is not language, it's not intelligence, it's how do we organize ourselves? It's our ability to organize ourselves into societies and groups. And that has been shifting and developing and getting better and better, right? And they're like, well, now is, I think now we're at the verge where we need to take the next step and figure out new ways of organizing things. And I think that's where, technology used to be the enemy, and for many people it still is, but it can be, a great helper in that, right? It becomes an extension of us. Again, we did this Cocoon event the last week, and I don't know if I'm allowed to say what the exercise was. I'm not sure, because it's sometimes a surprise for the founders who go to the program. But basically, there was a team of people in different countries. Everybody was on Zoom. I think it was 9 to 12 people per group. And they were given a task that they have to do together, right? And I was astonished by how well they were able to do the task, right? Like, I'm convinced 100% that put them in a room and give them that task, and they would either fail miserably or do it much worse, right? Like,
interesting.
And that was interesting to me as well. I was a mentor there, and I realized that me as a mentor, I was having a much easier time, right? I had 3 screens as I have now, 2 cameras, 1 microphone, and a phone. Right, so I was able to listen to people at the same time, do some tasks for the group to help the group, very quickly find resources, and we could collaborate on Google Sheets and Google Words or whatever. I don't care what technology, but we were able to collaborate, do things together. Somebody's writing a sentence, but somebody's editing the beginning of the sentence at the same time, while somebody who is a third is already writing the next paragraph, while a 5th person is doing the budget for the whole thing. Right, and you're all of that is happening live on the same screen, right? In a normal organization, that just doesn't happen, right? The first person has to deliver the first text and send it to the other person. The other person reads it, maybe edits some part, and then that says, look, we've done that text. What's the budget of this text? And that gets sent to someone else. And in this thing, everybody was doing it in the same moment, instantly. And I was just like, wow, that's beautiful. And I think that's the beauty of this COVID thing as well, that a lot of companies are forced to do that, and many are realizing that people are actually much more efficient for that very reason, right? I am much more efficient with my 3 screens, and where we can collaborate very directly, and also conflict, right? It's not just about collaboration; it's also how do you manage conflict? I can mute people. But as an example, that was a joke. But there are new ways.
This is how to say the sponsored advertising of remote work.
yes.
Yeah.
So I think I still love. I think it's important to meet people.
Yeah.
For sure, I miss that a lot. But at the same time, for this future we're talking about, where we have this collaborative companies. I think we need to embrace the technology, but we also need to rise the level of responsibility in people, and we need to change the mindset of people. And again, not in a hippie way, right? Not in a go eat mushrooms and go to the next level, right? In a really practical way, think better about your fellow Earthians, right? That's why I call my podcast live stream Earthians, because I want you guys to realize that we're all from the same planet. It will be a good start.
That would be a good start, indeed. Yeah, that's a good point. It's interesting what you're saying. I believe that even making things work in cells, so to say, is already a huge improvement. But it's an interesting sort of idea that can you bring it even one step further and sort of not have any teams at all.
Yeah.
Just have a yeah. It's actually a good idea, a good point that it's sort of almost like imitating society,
Yeah.
because in society we don't, I mean, we have countries, but sort of
Unfortunately.
within them, unfortunately, exactly, agreed. So yeah,
But
it's
why did this topic interest you? Why did you decide to do PhD on that specific thing?
I think that it's sort of the next thing, possibly the next thing in sort of social innovation, so to say, at least on the organizational level. There's a lot of there's a lot of technological innovation. What I'm sometimes wondering is like, how do we sort of upgrade ourselves as people, the way we sort of operate, and that's back to what we were discussing was like self-awareness, for example, where I sometimes like question like, okay, if we could increase self-awareness, like would that really help? And what you were saying, like that, okay, perhaps technology could help us. um I also found the perspective of Yuval Noah Harari interesting, that like we are good at organization because of the stories we tell.
Yeah.
So that's also interesting, that perhaps like we need a better story. and
Yeah.
and what he talks about is that, okay, like there were three stories before, then there was just one story, and now we have none. And that's sort of the problem, the sort of the diagnosis of the whole mess going on, that we don't have a proper dominant story.
What do you
um
think the story could be?
Good question. um let's try to brainstorm together. I think first of all, like our values need to be fleshed out, so to say. And I think one of the keys is, I actually think that sort of um, currently, making money for the sake of money feels weird. So I feel like there is a lot of that
Yeah.
somehow. I'm not sure how to pinpoint that exactly. Maybe it's not money for the sake of money, but money for the sake of stuff that doesn't matter.
Right.
So
I mean,
and
what
and,
is money
and I guess,
anyways?
yeah. Yeah, I guess money itself is not the problem, but it's more like, what do we value, so to say.
Yeah.
um and yeah, I think self-awareness is a big thing. So education, yes, education. Like I'm a big believer in sort of education as the key to a lot of these issues, in a way that you need to start very early on, and you need to know what you're going for. Like every kid having therapy, every kid, having meditation courses, every kid learning, not just information and facts, but actually sort of learning skills, how to live in the world, what is a good life, how to build relationships, how to solve problems. I think currently it's actually like there's sort of inbuilt values in our system, but I'm not even sure what they are. And like, do we, and they don't feel very right, so to say. So obviously behind every process you have some certain values, like behind your education system. And currently it's kind of like, uh, mhm. Mhm, mhm. No. Mhm. Yeah. 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 But also the same thing on the level of society. Like our governments right now, like are they that clear? Like it feels like they operate on some sort of legacy values, and even them they are not sure. Like, do they even support them? They're not completely fleshed out. It's obviously different parties. Okay, Social Democratic Party. They have certain sort of like values kinda behind them, but the world is changing, so they're not really sure what's going on. And that, by the way, for everyone listening who are sort of tired of like abstract answers to this question, I really, and for you, Dimitri, yourself, I really recommend the book called The Listening Society. And then after that, I think The Nordic Ideology. It's by the same author. So that's probably the best thing I've read in the past sort of couple of years, and it exactly answers that question through a political prism. So kind of like, okay, how do we actually design political system that could address all these issues? And basically, I wouldn't be able to sort of convey the whole argument from two books very shortly, but one of the core ideas is that you could actually create sort of ministries that are responsible for these things that you value, like relationships, for example, like you know. No rush, no pressure. Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
You couldn't hear me. Thank you for letting us know. I think I found the problem.
Okay. I
Right. So for some time at least, they couldn't hear me. There was a problem with my microphone. It shut itself off, interestingly,
Wow.
and you disappeared. So technical problems are to be expected. I did say a few cool things in the meanwhile, but I don't know. I don't know at which point the sound actually turned itself off.
At least
Um,
the last thing I heard from you was about the president not knowing how to answer the question, what are our country's values?
yes, right. I was
I
talking
wanted
about.
to comment that probably Trump would find an answer,
He would
but I'm
definitely
not
find an
sure.
answer.
I'm not sure we would be satisfied with that.
Yes, he would find an answer. There's no question that that man doesn't answer. I wish he didn't though, but yes, but I do.
I'm sure Putin would also find an answer.
Oh well, Russia has historical values, I think,
Yeah,
that are kind of maybe easy to come up with, but that's not not explicitly said.
yeah,
But
that's also
yeah,
true.
again, I don't like the concept of countries to begin with.
Agreed. Yeah, I support you there completely. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
interesting. Well, listen, I think with the technical problems, also with what we've been talking about, I think we've been talking for an hour straight. I do have a feeling that we are nearing the end of the discussion, just energy-wise, because I think we talked on a lot of topics, from death to life to governments and society to wisdom and knowledge and addictions. There was a lot of interesting topics built into it. If anybody has any questions, feel free to drop them in the chats right now, which are either YouTube or Twitch is welcome. But I think other than that, I'm ready to start calling it a day. What I want to do with this, of course, is thank everyone who supported this first edition of Earthians Unscripted. I think it was very cool, right? Like I really enjoyed our talk. I love the
Me too.
unscripted part. And not preparing the questions too much and really
It seemed
talking
almost
about it.
scripted. It was
Yeah,
so good, it almost seemed scripted.
in some ways, yes, it felt like it, but that's because it was a really cool, lively conversation. I am gonna put it up online. I'm gonna put it up maybe as a podcast even, and just use the sound. I don't know if that part where I got cut is still in it or not. Let's see. And yeah, thank you, Dima. Thank you for joining me today. Also, if anyone liked what we talked about, you feel free to go to my Earthian's Patreon page. I have a few Patreons already, but if I get even one from this particular chat, that will give me, the energy to keep going and keep doing this. Because that's like a bit of feedback. It's really not about, the financial element at all. It's more about like, people are valuing what we're talking about, right? And I'm like, okay, if that's cool, then I want to do it. And I think it's also, a philosophical thing. I believe that once you do something, if the world responds, then I'm like, I want to go in that direction, right? And if the world doesn't respond, then I'm like, well, is my energy worth it? Do I need to go in that direction? Maybe I shouldn't, right? So that's also why I'm doing these Patreons and other things, just to know if I should be doing this.
Yeah.
Any comments or questions or anything you want to say at the end to everyone that's listening now and will listen to in the future?
Nothing much. Thanks for organizing this. I think this was great, and I'm interested already to hear other discussions. And I think there's a lot of depth to explore. So yeah,
Well,
definitely.
let's explore it together and with other Earthians. And I really hope that everyone who listens and every guest starts answering the question where you're from with the answer Earth. I've been doing it for years myself, and it's an amazing conversation starter. But I also honestly mean it that I am from Earth.
That's beautiful. I should definitely steal that from you. I think
Please,
I should.
the more people steal it, the better.
Oh well. And by the way, I don't know if you want to do it now or at some point later. I would also be really curious about to find out more about your work currently with is it Earthians, right?
Yeah. I mean,
so beyond the podcast, so that would be amazing.
It is Earthians, but like my main partner and we're taking our time, right?
Yeah.
And I love that, right? And I think that's what founders don't do, right? They rush straight into the business, and I've been a great believer of that. In some essence, I am very much a strong believer in that. But we are spending a lot of time of aligning our values, right? Like literally going like, okay, list your values. Okay, which ones of them should be in the company? All of them? Half of them? What do you mean by diligence? Right? Okay, one of the values of my partner is diligence, right? But like diligence can mean many things, right?
Yeah.
If for me, if a person is overly diligent, that's a problem, right? If every task takes 5 years to complete just because they want to do it better than anyone else. But then when we discussed it was a very beautiful definition of diligence, right? It was a definition of like doing just enough to make perfectly good product, right? Like it was a beautiful definition. I can totally support it, right? So we're taking our time, and that's why there's nothing announced really, but it's going to be surrounding, the concept that we talked about, like how to make people collaborate within companies and between companies, right? And how to help people build companies in a new way, right? And that's what we're trying to figure out how to do. And again, everyone is welcome to talk about it, ask questions about it, participate about it. There's also a Discord channel that I've started. So if you're also a patron, you can get access to the Discord channel, and we can discuss things together and see if I can help. I'm also always open to kind of questions, and I love to answer them at length. So anyone is welcome to do that. Thanks for asking.
I'm super intrigued. So you managed with that at least. So we're all looking forward to find out more.
Well, you're already on Discord, and I'm sure we'll figure out ways of working together, especially given your PhD topic. I think that's so in line with what we're going to be doing. So I think we should talk more about it.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe again on the live stream.
Sounds amazing.
Cool. Hey, thank you so much, Dima.
It was a pleasure.
I will see you soon, and thank you for being on the podcast.
Thanks for inviting me.
Perfect.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right. Thank you all very much for sticking around for the first edition of Earthians Unscripted. It was a fun experience for me personally, and again, like that's the reason I was doing it, like to have these types of conversations and have them recorded. And I think that's one aspect that I strongly recommend people looking at is like, why are you doing things, right? What's the motivation? And if it's money or if it's something else, there's usually a problem there, right? So for me, this is, mostly about talking to really cool people and learning new things from them. And the fact that people are listening, it's kind of like a benefit that somebody might get out of it, right? But I am doing it because I'm passionate about talking to people. And I think it's super important to find things you're passionate about and pursue them. And hopefully, the world will respond and reward you with feedback about it. So any feedback is super welcome. So let me know what you think. And thank you for this first episode. Over and out.